Hi friends, Ryan from Barn 3 here, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can program one of our OXU pedals to work with your H90 from Eventide. Now it's good to keep in mind that any of our OXUs will work with the H90, including our OXU Mini or our OXU 3. But we're going to recommend that you probably are going to want to choose either the OXU Standard or the OXU 3. OXU Standard will be the thinnest, smallest design that we have that will fit nicely in front of the H90, but it only has 2 buttons here. You can add a third with our Tesla tap, or the OXU 3 has 3 buttons right on the pedal. So a couple other things to keep in mind right off the bat is, number one, if you are using our optional OXU mounting plate, we're going to go ahead and program the pedal before you mount it to the plate. Once it's mounted to the plate, you won't have access to the slide switch on the back of the OXU, and we need to do that for programming. So if you have any other questions about the mounting plate, why you might want to use one, or how you actually use it to mount your pedals, we're going to have a separate video on that that will explain everything in detail. Secondly, all of our OXUs come with a custom Barn 3 TRS cable that's about 11.5 inches long, which will work fine in this scenario. If you want a slightly shorter cable that might work better, we will also be offering a 9-inch cable that will work with this pedal as well. Finally, in the box with the OXU Standard or the OXU Mini, you're going to see this little adapter cable, and this is a power adapter that is only used with Boss pedals, so you don't have to use this in this particular setup. Okay, let's go ahead and start working on the programming for our OXU with our H90. Now, right up front, I just want to mention that the H90 is a very complex piece of equipment, and there's a lot of different options that you have, especially when it comes to aux switching. I'm just going to show you a few different examples that I think you might find useful, but I'm going to recommend that you read your user manual so you understand all the different options. And then also Eventide has some great videos on their YouTube channel that do a great job of explaining the H90 and aux switching as well. So right off the bat, it's good to note that the H90 has a few different modes that you can use it in. Our first one here is on preset select mode, which we can just scroll through and select our different presets. If we press and hold this button, we go into bank mode, where we have all of our different banks, and then we have 3 different presets at our feet. And if we press the perform button over here, we go into sort of a more in-depth view of the program that we have selected. So we're going to be using some of these different modes as we program our H90. Now, before we actually do any programming in the H90, we need to make sure that our OXU is set up to work properly with the H90. You'll notice that there's a slide switch on the back of the pedal and on the bottom of the pedal. And all we're going to do is make sure that both of these slide switches are all the way to the left. The back one will go to the N position for normal, and the bottom one will go to the NSM position. Both of them all the way to the left. Then we're going to connect the pedal using a TRS cable. Now, the first method that I'm going to show you is we're going to put the H90 into bank mode, and we're going to use the OXU to scroll up and down in banks. So to do that, we're going to start by pressing the select button for a couple seconds. We're now in bank mode, and then we have 3 different programs at our feet here. To get into the programming for the OXU, we're going to press Programs and Routing for a couple seconds. Then we're going to scroll to I/O. I'm going to press the select knob. And we're going to scroll over until we see Expression and aux. Now we have the OXU plugged into the pedal 1 input on the back of the H90. And what we want to do is we want to tell this that we're using an aux switch. So we're going to scroll over until we see switches 1 through 3. Then we can press the select knob to back out, and we're going to go to global. Press the select knob, and then we're going to scroll over until we see pedal control. Now I want this switch to be banked down, and I want this one to be bank up. So what we're going to do is we're going to scroll over until we see bank down. Bank down. And our control source, we're going to go to switch 1. Now it's good to keep in mind that on the OXUs, the switches always go from left to right. So it'll be 1, 2, and if we had a Tesla tap, that would be 3. And the same is true on the OXU 3. 1, 2, 3. Then we're going to scroll to bank up, and we're going to put it here. So that's going to be switch 2. And now we can press our perform button to back out. So now we can bank up with the right switch, bank down, and then we have our 3 programs at our feet. Now, another thing that you might find helpful in this setting would be to have tap tempo. So we can do that by plugging one of our Tesla tap pedals into the side of the OXU. Then we'll go back into our programming menu and we'll look for tap tempo. And then we're going to put that on switch 3. Now, the only downside to this is there is no visual cue for the tap tempo. No LEDs are lighting up when you press it, but I still find it very useful in this particular setting. Now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to show you a different setup using the OXU 3. So for this setup, we're going to be using the OXU 3, and we're just going to double check that our slide switches are in the proper position. For the back one, it's all the way to the left in the N position for normal, and on the bottom, it's all the way to the left in the NSM position. We're going to go ahead and plug it in with our TRS cable. Now we're going to go ahead and put the H90 into perform mode for this example. We're going to go back into our programming menu by pressing and holding programs and routing for a couple seconds. Now I've erased my previous settings that I used in the last example. So we're going to go back into I/O. We're going to go over to expression in aux, and we're in pedal 1 input on the back here. So we're going to change this to switches 1 through 3. Press our select knob and back out. And we're going to scroll over to global, press the select knob. And then we're going to, I'm already on pedal control here, but you might show up somewhere like this. We'll go over to pedal control. And for this one, we're going to start with parameter load, and we're going to put that on switch 1. Then we're going to go to decrement, and we're going to put that on switch 2. Then we're going to go to increment. I'm going to put that on switch 3. We can hit our perform button and we'll back out. Now with the OXU, we can go up in programs by pressing the right switch. We can go down in programs by pressing the middle switch. And then we can select the program by pressing the left switch. And then our H90 buttons, we still have preset A active in bypass, preset B active in bypass. But you'll notice that our P foot switch over here is still bypass and active. So I might recommend in this setting that we're going to change this button to be tap tempo. So what we're going to do is we're going to press the P button until we see this change. We're going to go over to tap tempo. Okay, now our light is blinking. And you'll notice that there's an asterisk up here, which means we made a change to this program and we have to save it. So what we're going to do is we're going to press programs for a couple seconds. Now here we can change the location that we want to save it to. We're going to just keep it where it was. So we'll press perform. Here we can change the name of the program. We're going to press perform again. And now it's saved. So if I go to a different program and load that, and we come back, you'll see we have tap tempo. Now the only downside to this is you will have to change this to be tap tempo on a per program basis. So if I go to program 29, I'll want to change this again. Oops, I went too far. I went too far again. And then we need to save it. So we'll press programs, perform, perform. Now it's saved. We go back to 30. We still have our tap tempo there. Go down, we still have our tap tempo there. So this is a little bit more work because you'd have to go through on a program by program basis to change your tap tempo. But personally, I think this is the way that I would prefer to use the H90 in a live setup. But there's one more way that we can go even deeper to the H90, and I'm going to show you that now. Now for this last example, we're going to go pretty deep, and I'm going to show you how you can go on a per program basis and make the aux switches do different things on different programs. This is pretty complex, and I'm only going to show you one example here. So I'm going to recommend again that you read your user manual and get a better understanding of all the different options that you could do with this thing. But to start, we're going to go into our programming menu again. We're going to hold programs and routing for 2 seconds. We're not going to change anything on the I/O because we still want our aux switch to come in on the first input there, but we are going to go back into our global settings. And we're going to get rid of all this programming we did. So we're going to turn that to off, turn that one to off, turn that one to off. I'm going to back out. And the reason we're doing that is because we are going to be doing individual programming on the foot switches, and we don't want global settings to affect what we're doing. So we're going to go back into perform mode now. And we'll just pick this program here. And what we're going to do is we're going to start by pressing and holding the P button for a couple seconds. Now in here, we have different parameters that we can assign to different switches on our aux switch. I'm going to go to hot switch 1. Say I want hot switch 1 to live right here. Go over on our control source until we see aux switch, and we already have it set to aux switch 1. I'm going to back out. Let's say we want this one to be hot switch 2. So we'll press and hold A. Go to hot switch 2. Change our control source to aux switch. And then we'll go to switch 2. And right now we have hot switch 1 and hot switch 2, and those are in latching functionality. But let's say sometimes I want that hot switch 2 to just be a momentary function that I can just press and let go. We can do that by just pressing A again for a couple seconds. We'll go back in here, go to hot switch 2, but we're going to go one more until we see hot switch 2 M for momentary. Select our control source, which is aux switch, and then we're going to scroll to switch 3. We can back out. So now if we press our perform button here, we'll go to the second page of our program here, and we can see what these hot switches are doing. Right here we have hot switch 1 activating and bypassing, activating, and then this is momentary. Just doing it momentary on hot switch 2. And you don't have to be on page 2 for it to work. It'll work right here. You can see it changing here. So as you can see, you can really get into the nitty-gritty on a per program basis if you choose to program everyone manually. Now, of course, all these programming options can be done in the H90 control app. So I'm just going to show you a quick overview of how you might be able to set up some of these settings with the app. In the control app, setting up an aux pedal is actually pretty simple. All we're going to do is we're going to start by clicking on System up here in the top. Then we're going to go into our Input-Output section here. And here's where we tell the H90 that we're using an aux switch. Now it might be set for EXP when you open it, but we're going to put this on switch 1 through 3. If we're in pedal 1 input on the back of the H90, then we can go to external control. And in here, say we want to set up the H90 to work in the second example I showed you, where we're in program mode, we could go right here to load, go down to aux switch 1, increment, we would want as our rightmost foot switch, so I'd go to aux switch 3, and decrement, we would go to aux switch 2. Okay, let's get rid of those settings for a second. And if we want to do that last example that I showed you, where we're going on a per program basis and changing each foot switch to do a different thing, we can just go to Edit, find the preset we want. Right now we're on Lost City. And down here we have our options for our P, A, and B switches. So let's say we're in P. We want to go and find, here we go, hot switch 1. We'll select aux and go to switch 1. Then we could go to switch A, go to hot switch 2, go to aux, set that for switch 2, and we can do the same thing we did before and go to hot switch 2 momentary, go to aux, and put that on switch 3. And that's how you can set up an OXU to work with your H90. If you have any other questions or you want to learn more, please head over to barn3.com.